For an artist of Jungkook's stature, silence often means strategy. But here, the strategy doesn't seem to be his. HYBE's management structure has always been known for precision. Every word, every appearance, every hint of a future move must align with timing, market forecasts, and brand image. Jungkook's global dominance makes him both the agency's most valuable asset and its most sensitive subject. Allowing him to freely talk about a solo tour could disrupt the delicate balance that HYBE maintains between individual and group branding, financial projections, and internal scheduling. So, the simplest way to maintain that control is through silence, and that silence feels imposed. What makes this silence more noticeable is how visible everything else about him has been. Jungkook has appeared in countless brand campaigns, dominated global charts, and maintained public engagement across every platform. His presence is constant, yet the topic of touring, which naturally follows such success, remains untouched. The gap is striking. It suggests that while HYBE amplifies every controllable aspect of his career from endorsements to content, they suppress the one element that could shift the balance of power, his independence on stage. A solo tour is more than a performance circuit. It represents autonomy. It allows an artist to shape their narrative without corporate mediation. For Jungkook, whose artistry thrives on authenticity, that kind of independence carries weight. It's a declaration that his music can stand on its own, separate from the structure that created him. And that's precisely why HYBE would be cautious. Once Jungkook steps on stage alone, he's no longer just BTS's youngest member or a representative of HYBE's global empire. He becomes a self-contained phenomenon. The company understands the implications. Controlling that trajectory requires control over his words. Fans have noticed the disconnect. The same audience that watched him dominate with songs like Seven and Standing Next to You can sense when something doesn't align. The momentum he built in 2023 should have naturally transitioned into touring. Instead, it halted. And in the vacuum of official statements, fans began constructing their own explanations, most of which lead back to the belief that HYBE is restraining him from even mentioning it. Protest trucks outside the company headquarters didn't appear out of nowhere. They were manifestations of collective frustration, not just because there's no tour, but because there's no transparency. The irony is that Jungkook doesn't need promotion to command global attention. His name alone generates headlines. Yet, within that power lies the agency's dilemma. Every independent success he achieves challenges the traditional structure of idol management. If he begins to speak freely about his solo direction, it risks shifting the focus from HYBE's brand to Jungkook's individual identity. For a corporation that thrives on group-based marketing ecosystems, that's a destabilizing prospect. So, silence becomes a management tactic disguised as professionalism. From a business standpoint, HYBE's caution is understandable. BTS remains a collective entity, even as its members pursue solo paths. The company's long-term strategy relies on preserving that collective narrative for the group's eventual reunion post-military service. Allowing Jungkook to openly discuss a solo tour could inadvertently signal a permanent departure from that unity. The optics alone would ripple through markets, fan communities, and brand partnerships. The risk isn't artistic, it's structural. In that sense, the silence is less about denying Jungkook's ambition and more about protecting a larger corporate equation. Yet, for the artist himself, that protection might feel like limitation. Jungkook's artistic philosophy has always been rooted in self-evolution. His interviews, his behind-the-scenes footage, and even his stage demeanor reveal an artist constantly striving for refinement. When he says he's not ready for a tour, one can sense both truth and constraint. The truth: he genuinely aims for perfection, wanting a setlist that tells a story. The constraint: he cannot publicly frame his readiness beyond what's been approved. That tension between sincerity and silence defines this entire chapter of his career. Every great performer reaches a point where silence speaks louder than words. For Jungkook, this phase marks a quiet confrontation between artistry and authority. He continues to rehearse, to record, to shape his sound, yet says nothing about where that effort is leading. It's a contrast that feels deliberate, an orchestrated stillness meant to maintain corporate order while the artist's ambition continues to build beneath the surface. The absence of an official statement doesn't erase the signs. Industry watchers notice when management limits exposure to specific subjects. They recognize when interview segments are edited, when PR scripts are adjusted, when public messaging follows patterns. Jungkook's pattern is clear. Everything about his solo era is promoted except the tour. The contrast is too sharp to ignore. Silence can be a tool, but it can also be a signal. And in this case, it signals control. Still, control has its limits. The more HYBE attempts to contain the narrative, the more curiosity it generates. The silence becomes louder, and audiences start to fill the gaps themselves. For Jungkook, that creates a paradox. He remains at the center of conversation without ever saying a word. Every absence of comment becomes a headline. Every unspoken sentence becomes speculation. And in that silence, he becomes even more powerful. Not because of what he says, but because of what he doesn't. HYBE likely understands this too. The company's history with information management is strategic. They know that silence can maintain tension, and tension sustains interest. But in the case of Jungkook, that strategy risks backfiring. His global fanbase isn't just large, it's analytical. They track patterns, timestamps, schedules, and internal cues. When he avoids the topic of a solo tour, they don't forget they archive. The silence becomes documentation, not disappearance. There's also an undercurrent of resistance within that silence. Jungkook may not be allowed to speak openly about a tour, but everything else he does seems to hint at one. The choreography rehearsals, the extended performance versions, the full band arrangements during his live sets, they all resemble preparation for a concert-scale project. Even his production choices mirror the spatial intensity of stage work. It's as if the tour exists in fragments, embedded within his actions rather than his words. This subtle defiance, saying nothing yet showing everything, defines Jungkook's current position. He communicates through execution, not expression. Each performance acts like an encrypted message that he's ready, that he's waiting, that he knows when silence is necessary. The restraint doesn't weaken him, it sharpens him. It transforms limitation into language. When viewed through that lens, the idea that HYBE prohibits him from speaking isn't just about censorship, it's about hierarchy. The company sets the frame, and Jungkook paints within it, but the painting still belongs to him. Every decision he makes artistically, every subtle shift in tone or style, is a negotiation between his creative independence and the boundaries of corporate governance. That negotiation defines not just this phase, but the evolution of modern K-pop itself, where global icons must navigate between personal truth and structural control. The silence, then, becomes more than a corporate tactic. It's a mirror reflecting the dual reality of fame, power and restraint, visibility and confinement, autonomy and allegiance. Jungkook stands at the center of that mirror, aware of both sides, choosing to express himself not through what he says, but through what he creates. There's also a visible shift in how Jungkook manages his connection with the audience. When he can't discuss his future plans, he replaces disclosure with demonstration. He communicates through action, not announcement. Every interaction, every performance, every decision about presentation carries an implicit message that he knows what fans are waiting for and that he's building toward it even if he cannot say it out loud. This method of silent communication strengthens his position more than open declarations could. The mystery sustains interest, and the restraint creates focus. From a corporate angle, this balance benefits both sides temporarily. HYBE maintains narrative order. Jungkook maintains creative respect. But the equilibrium isn't sustainable forever. Eventually, silence demands resolution. Audiences, especially at Jungkook's scale, don't stay patient indefinitely. When fans feel that an artist's growth is being limited, their loyalty shifts from company to individual. And when that happens, the corporate silence no longer protects the brand, it isolates it. What makes Jungkook unique is his ability to stay still without stagnating. Even when restricted, he evolves. He uses every limitation as creative material. Silence becomes tension. Tension becomes art. It's a rare form of maturity to resist the urge to explain, to allow understanding to emerge from action rather than argument. That's what makes his current phase so fascinating. It's not rebellion for rebellion's sake. It's precision, knowing exactly when not to speak. Because silence, in this case, amplifies the truth. Behind this dynamic lies the broader reality of modern idol management. K-pop operates within frameworks that depend on synchronization. Every announcement affects multiple divisions: marketing, distribution, stock value, partnerships. Jungkook's influence is so vast that even one sentence about a potential tour could alter corporate forecasts. That's why silence is safer for the system. But for an artist whose purpose is expression, silence is friction. And friction always creates movement, even if it's invisible at first. It's important to recognize that Jungkook's silence doesn't equal compliance. It's strategy. It's the awareness of his position as both artist and product, a duality he constantly negotiates with intelligence. Instead of speaking prematurely and triggering restrictions, he refines the art itself. When the moment arrives when timing, structure, and readiness align, his first tour will not just be a tour. It will be the culmination of every unspoken sentence, every suppressed idea, every controlled moment. That's what the silence is building toward. The prohibition, if it exists formally or informally, cannot contain his trajectory forever. HYBE can delay announcements, limit public statements, and filter interviews, but it cannot suppress creative inevitability. Jungkook's music, his visuals, his preparation, they all move toward live expression. He's an artist designed for stage translation. The longer the silence lasts, the more explosive the eventual moment becomes. The company's strategy might be containment, but his nature is expansion. The conflict is built into the system. As of now, the story remains suspended, one side enforcing order, the other quietly rewriting it. The public sees restraint. Insiders sense momentum. Every artist eventually faces a defining moment where silence can no longer sustain meaning. For Jungkook, that moment is approaching. Whether HYBE lifts the restriction or he transcends it through sheer inevitability, the result will redefine how individual freedom functions within a system built on control. In that sense, the silence is not a void, it's a countdown.